Hey everybody, Derek here to bring another video for Z Nation. I apologize for not making this video last night. I went to my Halloween party for my school, and I didn't get back until 2:30 in the morning, and it was a little late to make the video. So I'm making it now, and this is a review for the 8th episode of Z Nation's second season, which is The Collector. I thought it was an amazing episode. It really did delve a lot into Murphy's perspective, and just the Collector was an amazing character. Part of me wishes that they could carry on his story a little bit longer, but I think it served a very good purpose, and I'm going to let you know what I think. If you are not caught up with Z Nation, this video will contain spoilers. Okay, so the way that the episode picks up is, the group is in pretty, terrible situation. They have very little food, very few bullets left, and very little gas in the tank. And they're really trying to figure out, well, what are we supposed to do? How are we going to get to California at this rate? And Murphy was sleeping, and either he dreamt it or as he was waking up, he saw this. I couldn't tell which one. But Doc goes to wake Murphy up, and Murphy, in a sense, sees Doc's brain. It was almost like he was able to look through at Doc's forehead and see, Doc's brain. It seemed like Murphy was able to do that, and it kind of startled him a little bit. Like, whoa, what am I seeing here? And it's very interesting how brains play a role later on in the episode, because the group ends up going out to look for food, and Doc and Murphy are trying some tree bark to see if it's edible, and Murphy actually sees a brain hanging from a tree. And he's like, oh, what's that? That's interesting. So he's going towards it, and he falls right through a trap door. Down there is a zombie who looks like he's wearing prison gear or something, but anyways, he's down there, and of course Murphy's panicking. He's like, hey, where am I at? Help, what's going on? And while he's waiting, he sits with the zombie and plays a little bit of, games with it to, mind control it. And suddenly this guy comes in, he's dressed in like protective gear, and kills the zombie. And we find out that this person is named the Collector. I think his real first name was Dean, but we know him as the Collector. And what the Collector is he's a man who is obsessed with zombies. And his goal is to start his own zombie museum. He wants to learn as much as he possibly can about the zombies, and he's been doing experiments. He takes Murphy into this room where he's been, cutting the, brains out of zombies and experimenting with them. He takes notes about everything that he can, and he knows quite a bit about zombies, and he's very obsessed with zombies. Later on in the episode, he takes Murphy down this hall with a lot of movie posters with zombie films, some from the very, very, beginning of films. And he talks about how they have significance for the zombie apocalypse now, and just wants to get Murphy's perspective. Now, he does know who Murphy is. He kind of figures it out as time goes on. He has heard the broadcasts, and he's very, very, happy that Murphy fell into his museum. He talks with him. He wants to learn everything that he can to see if what Murphy is saying is actually true. And in order to keep him under control, the Collector puts this shock collar around his neck, that pretty much any time Murphy tries to, get away or act out or something, all the Collector has to do is press a button, and Murphy's, he should. I mean, that's a pretty powerful shock collar. I think it was like 50,000 volts, I think he said. So it's pretty effective, say the least. And, the Collector pretty much has this idea of opening up a show for people to come in and take a look at his collection. And, he wants to profit off of the zombie apocalypse, which, hey, lots of other people are doing as well. Sketchy and Skeezy, from the last episode. And, of course, the Zeros and the Scorpion. I mean, people are constantly trying to find ways to better themselves even though the circumstances of the world are pretty dire. They want to make something better for themselves, and that's just what they do, and that's what the collector does. Um, and what he ends up doing is the collector actually takes samples from Murphy. I mean, blood samples. He sticks a needle in Murphy that's like 8 inches to get a bone marrow sample. Pretty painful stuff. Murphy does, of course, still feel pain, so he can feel all of this. And as it's going along, he's taking notes about all of this. And he ends up doing an interview with Murphy. The two of them sit down in like this studio that he made, which ironically was called Dead Live, which is the phone number for Talking Dead. It's 1-800-DEAD-LIVE. So I kind of thought there was a little hint towards the Walking Dead world in this episode, as well as something else, which I'll explain later, which is very interesting. But they made several nods to, the zombie films that have been, popular, like Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead. And again, I think they made some Walking Dead references as well. But anyways, so, they basically have an interview, where the two of them are talking about various different things. And during this interview, he wants to know what Murphy thinks of brains, and Murphy goes, well, no, I've never eaten a human brain before. And what ends up happening is the collector has Murphy eat a human brain, and Murphy takes a small bite, forcefully, of course. The collector shoves it in his mouth, and it triggers something in Murphy's own brain that he likes, and he ends up just like devouring the thing, altogether, which is definitely something that I wonder will come back to affect Murphy later on. A lot of us throughout the show have been asking, is Murphy more human or is he more of a zombie? And the bone marrow that the collector took from Murphy was going to, in a sense, try to answer that question, but we don't know. Those samples were never actually experimented on. But, we see both sides of Murphy really come out in this episode. The fact that, he does have zombie DNA flowing through him. And it really makes me wonder if, because he ate that human brain, if another situation might present itself and Murphy might not be able to control himself, kind of like how Cassandra was, jumping on the cars and, killing those people that were chasing after the caravan in the third episode. It really does make you wonder if Murphy may have tendencies that he can't control as time goes along. So I'll be very interested to see if there are consequences of him doing that. But, he also tells the collector about how he came to be the Murphy. He talks about how he was imprisoned, how Dr. Murch was doing experiments on the prisoners, and his, experiment may have been successful. And he does still hold a lot of resentment for that. I mean, we see flashbacks of the series as we go along. And if you remember back in the pilot, Murphy said, pike me, put me out of my misery and give me mercy, or I will hunt you down and eat your brains. And that parallels what he says in the episode, in the interview. So it really makes me wonder if later on they might get to California and Murphy may decide to exact revenge rather than follow through with helping the group in finding a cure. So that's a very good possibility that we may see going down the road. And he also talks about his daughter, Lucy, which really makes him emotional. It's very hard for him to say things about her. And, of course, the collector has several other questions. He wants to know if Murphy can really control the zombies, because Murphy tries to, downplay just how important he is, but there comes a time when the collector leaves, and he has this zombie doctor that kind of works for him as an assistant, and Murphy tries to manipulate that zombie to cut him loose, and it was all a trick. The collector really wanted to see if he could, and it turns out that he can. Obviously we know that, and now the collector knows that, which makes Murphy even more valuable to him. And it turns out that the collector has been collecting various different zombies. He's collected a radioactive zombie, he's collected a phyto zombie, the plant zombie, and he collected a blaster. He has all three of those zombies. And of course, he also has a celebrity zombie section, which contains the actual George R. R. Martin. This is the episode that George R. R. Martin, the creator of the Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire series, comes into play. And, he's in there, and he has a book out. I think it was called A Promise of Spring. So, it kind of pokes a little bit of fun at George R. R. Martin for, taking a long time to write his Game of Thrones series books. But, I have to give respect to him. I can only imagine how complex that series is. I watched the TV show. I have yet to read the books, but I'd like to one day. But, when you're writing something and you're making something, you want to make it as great as you can. And you don't want to necessarily cut corners just to get something out faster. So I can, in a sense, kind of respect him for that. But anyways, the collector actually tells him that he was at Comic-Con and some dirty guy with a crossbow, his words, tried to save George R. R. Martin and was killed. Now, that might be a Daryl reference right there, which I found myself chuckling a little bit, wondering, hey, was that Daryl? Was Daryl at Comic-Con and that's what happened to him? That's why there's no, Daryl and Z-Nation. The two worlds are different. So I guess, hey, Z-Nation killed off Daryl. Ugh! That's a little, definitely a little shocking, but I definitely chuckled a little bit whenever I heard that. And, he has George R. R. Martin signing the books. And he also has an exhibit for Murphy, for Murphy to sit on this throne. And for, the collector's idea for Murphy is to, have him sit up there and, recount the days of the zombie apocalypse and to, explain who he is. And Murphy's like, oh, heck no, you're not making me an exhibit. I am not your play toy. I am a person, and you're not doing that to me. And he criticizes the collector for keeping zombies in this manner. So you see both sides of Murphy coming out in this episode. And he, of course, tries to escape, but each time he tries to, the shot caller basically puts him down. Now, while this is happening, of course, the group is trying to look for him, and 10,000 ends up coming across him, and, he sees the collector, but in order to prevent Murphy from shouting out, the collector keeps shocking him, and 10,000 realizes something is up, so he leaves some of his supplies outside. He sneaks in, finds the museum, and then, the collector is able to, shock him with, I think it was a cattle prod or something. But anyways, he knocks out 10,000 and has him captured, and he ends up saying, hey, I want to open up this new exhibit called, the Murphy and His Boy. And he wants Murphy to bite 10,000 because he wants to know what happens when somebody bites him, when he bites a human. And Murphy, is kind of forced into starting to do this. And 10,000, is of course angry and freaking out because of, what happened to Cassandra. Murphy bit Cassandra, and of course she came back as that zombie human hybrid that really didn't have the control that Murphy is able to have. And, 10,000's of course very worried about going through with that. But before Murphy can bite him, Murphy in a sense let the zombies that were being held captive loose, and the zombies end up devouring the collector. And, Murphy basically tells him, there's no mercy in this world. He doesn't have mercy for him, and just lets the zombies devour the collector altogether. Now, earlier the collector had fired a warning shot to make Murphy comply, which the group overhears outside. They find 10,000's Geary left outside. They go in, and of course, while this was going on, the Collector was draining Murphy's blood. So of course, Murphy's very weak, and what ends up happening is he passes out. So the zombies are starting to come at 10,000, but thankfully the group shows up, uses the rest of their bullets, and they have good aim. They take them all out, and they save the group. So they end up going back out to the car, and Murphy's sitting there, and of course with his blood all drained, they could have just taken the blood and left Murphy, but they don't. There's this loyalty amongst the group. The mission is to get Murphy there alive if they can, and they're going to follow through with that. So they honor that, and they take Murphy even though he's been causing them all this trouble. And Murphy even says, hey, you can leave me behind and just take the blood, but they won't do it. But before they end the episode, Murphy, talks to Warren and asks Warren not to leave him alone when they get to California. He makes her promise, and Warren does promise. And I think that a lot of that is really related to Murphy's fears of, becoming this experiment, because that's really what Murphy is going to become. He's really just struggling with this idea of being a person and being in control of what he does, but at the same time having this duty to, try to save mankind. But as a result, he really is going to become like a science experiment. I mean, I think that they're going to be poking and prodding him with needles, hooking him up to various things, having him do certain, tests. And I can only imagine what that must, do to somebody, even to be involved with that. And what Murphy is thinking, I mean, the experience with the Collector, I think, has really jarred his memory, to think this is pretty much what's going to happen. He remembers his days, getting experimented on before, and you can only imagine what they're going to do to him now. So I really did sympathize a lot with Murphy. I think we finally, in a sense, can understand why he is reacting this way, why he would be upset, about having this happen to him. And it kind of really, opened your eyes a little bit to him. So I think the show really did a good job with this episode. And I'm impressed, and I can't wait for next week. So I'm going to bring this video to a close. I want to thank all of you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, don't be afraid to leave them. Feel free to subscribe. I do have more videos coming. And if you have any suggestions for future videos that you would like to see, don't be afraid to suggest them. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you very much for watching.